Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, I'm clear. I'm good.
You're good.
All right. Heads up, I'm really nervous, and
Why?
let's have a good time. I don't know. I'm not used to having interviews with people. I usually talk about like a scientific topic. This way, I don't have to talk about personal stuff. But
Yeah,
now
yeah,
you're the topic, in a sense.
yeah.
So it's kind of weird to have one grown man asking another grown man about things. What's your favorite book? What's your favorite musician? Things like that. It's kind of weird. It must be weird being asked that too over and over.
Well, it's the funny thing is when you say things like favorite book, favorite XYZ, what happens to me often during interviews is all those things go out of my head immediately. So, uh, and then obviously afterwards I remember everything. But in the moment I'm like, fuck. I'm like, I don't know what a book is. No idea.
It's the same way as asking you questions. I have all these questions and then I just forget, and then it's just like this weird.
Yeah,
It's like this weird. Thank God for editing, because then I can edit out the awkward silences.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I'm sure there won't be any of those.
we never know. So thank you for being here. This is an honor. It's really cool that you said
It's an
yes.
honor to be here, man. I love your account, and it's been really important, actually.
Uh,
It's an important thing.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So how about we get started? I already started recording.
Yeah, cool. That's good.
Yeah. Okay. So I watched Tenet. And you
Uh-huh.
look like a badass.
Good. Thanks.
Everyone in that movie looked really cool and confident. We should start this podcast from the end and kind of go backwards.
Yeah, yeah. We'll move backwards through it.
Yeah.
We'll keep going, and then halfway through we'll start moving backwards.
So I guess what I wanted to talk about was just I guess your journey from the beginning. Your parents. I know you're
Yeah.
Gujarati. So
Mhm.
when did your parents grew up in England or did they grow up in India?
Uh, Mostly in India. Well, they were both born in Africa, actually. My dad was born in Nairobi in Kenya.
Oh,
My mum was born in what is now Zambia. At the time was Northern Rhodesia.
okay.
And then they both spent sort of a little time there, but mostly back in India.
What were they doing there?
I think my dad's dad was working in Nairobi, and my mum's dad was working there as well. And I'm still basically digging into my family history, trying to figure out, how we all kind of wound up where we were, how
Okay.
colonialism affected that, obviously. So I'm intrigued really at the moment to go on that journey myself. But then they spent a lot of time in India, and then dad came to the UK when he was 16,
Mm-hmm.
and my mum came when she was 21, I
This
think,
is the
21.
70s.
70s, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Late 70s. Well, dad came in 70 and
Okay.
uh and mum came in the late 70s. Yeah.
So they must have had a tough time dealing with the politics at that time.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny. So I talked to them about their experiences for my essay in The Good Immigrant, and I was surprised to hear because I mean, where I grew up here in England, I grew up in Cambridgeshire, which is a couple of hours north of London. And it's though there are South Asian communities in the sort of urban areas of the cities. I grew up in the countryside,
Oh yeah, how?
so I didn't grow up around many brown people.
Hmm.
And actually, the area where my dad and his family moved was also not a particularly there wasn't a huge Asian community there at the time. And so I'd kind of assumed that they would kind of stick out quite a lot, and that people would kind of target them for that reason. But actually, my dad, his experience was one where he was actually welcomed quite and quite well. And same thing with my mum when she moved here. That her family they were in northwest London for a little bit, and then Leicester. I think it was different for my mum though, because I think by the time she got here, they were established, especially in Leicester. There were established
Hmm.
Indian communities, so in a way that it was easy to assimilate. But for my dad growing up where he did, yeah, I'd assumed that he must have had the rough end of it, but actually he did okay. And I kind of wonder whether it's because the white people felt less threatened by a smaller amount
Okay.
of brown people. You know what I mean? Like, I think maybe the reason that the from people I've spoken to who grew up around that age, around that time in sort of inner city areas, because there was an influx of immigrants within a relatively short period of time. I think it was more of a jolt to the system, and I think that's why there was, you know, maybe so much pushback. And I think weirdly for my family, because they moved to such a predominantly white area,
Yeah.
it almost doesn't make any sense for me to say it that way, but that seems to be his experience. That actually they were kind of quite welcoming, and I just wonder whether it's because they just weren't as. It was more of a novelty than anything threatening.
Do you think
You know,
maybe it was because he integrated really well? You know, maybe his English was, on point and he was a very social
it
guy.
wasn't a.
He,
He was when my dad came. Actually, his English wasn't great, and
okay.
he kind of he had to. He tells me a story about a teacher who was really kind. So that he's got three older siblings. They're much older, and then he's got a younger sibling, and they're more in the same sort of ballpark of age. And so the younger two, my dad and my aunt, they had to find education. Like they were 16, but my dad had to do some top up of education, to do whatever he ended up doing. And so they went to this school and hoping for a place. I think maybe there was one school where they didn't, but then there was another school where the headmaster, I think, was basically like, you're going to need to do extra English lessons to really fully integrate here and to get the most out of the education. But he was willing to give that to them. He was willing to make time free of charge, I believe, to
Nice.
to allow them that opportunity. And I guess, that's another stroke of fortune, really, to find someone who had that kindness to do that. And then, yeah, and then his English obviously improved, and he was able to kind of fully come of age in a way. He was 16 when he got here, so he had to
That's
really,
a very young age. That's
yeah,
usually parents come at like, 30s and 40s with kids, but
hmm
yours grew up in England, somewhat.
yeah. They did a lot of growing up. I mean,
Home.
just because of their age, but
Yeah, and England is, I guess, their home, kind of, in a sense.
it is completely now. I mean, there are some people some immigrants who kind of dream of going back at
Hmm.
some point.
Yeah, a longing.
A longing, yeah, to return. I just did the audiobook for Nikesh Shukla's book Brown Baby. It's coming out in February,
Nice.
and he's got a beautiful bit in that where he talks about how he believes that his mum probably wanted to go back to India to live out the rest of her days, which sadly didn't come to pass. But
Yeah.
but
Do your
so that
did your
sorry, go
parents,
ahead.
sorry, did your parents have that same kind of longing to go back?
I don't think they do. I think that's I guess what I'm saying is that there are some people who do,
Yeah.
and there are some people who don't. I think my parents they they've had a good ride here. I think they've had their hardships, of course they have, but they're fortunate enough to still see England as home, and I think that they'll when we talk about such things as where they'd like to go to for their last days, I
Yeah.
think they'd want to be here.
Did your parents kind of growing up, did your parents try to teach you the culture, try to teach you the language and the religion?
Yeah, I
Because
mean, my mum more so than my dad, I think, and I think maybe that speaks to that the difference in time of dad coming when he was 16, mum coming a bit later. But mum was very much keen on us speaking Gujarati at home, so she wouldn't speak it. She's perfectly fluent in English, but she would only speak Gujarati to me and my sister at home, just to make sure that we could converse and and understand it.
did that work?
It did, yeah, it
How's
did.
your Gujarati?
It's a bit rusty now.
Okay.
Um, it's a bit rusty because I've been away from home for quite a few years, and um, I feel that not that I think shame is a good feeling at all, but I do feel that every time I'm talking to my mum on the phone and I'm like, I'm like, oh, I really should be able to speak Gujarati a bit better than this, but um,
Do
you
you
know,
are you worried that if you have kids that they might not, that language get lost
it's
in
an
the next
interesting one.
generation?
Yeah, it's one to think about, isn't it? I wonder whether I should make sure that I make the effort to speak Gujarati best as I can. And I think, in a way, I think me and my sister are quite keen to make sure that that happens.
It's hard. You have to actually put extra effort.
Yeah,
I have a
and so
nephew who doesn't speak
right,
Urdu, and his parents are trying really hard to speak Urdu to him. It just doesn't click. The cartoons he watches, the daycare he goes to, it's all English. So
yeah, that's what's difficult, isn't it? I
yeah,
think the thing is with my generation, with our generation, I suppose our parents probably spoke to each other in in their mother tongue.
hmm
So you just had it around you all the time. There was no, even though again they would every now and then slip into English, usually when you knew you were in trouble. But you know, the, there would be this constant sort of soundtrack, as it were. So you'd
yes.
get you from a completely young age, you'd get used to the cadence of the language and that sort of thing. So it'll be different for for the next generation, I think probably. But um, there's ways. I think I think we're lucky that my mum did that
Yeah.
because me and my sister can speak Gujarati fairly fluently, um, and so maybe it would be something that we'd make the effort to speak amongst the two of us, maybe. Um, yeah, it's an interesting question so that it doesn't disappear.
Did your parents meet in England, or did they go back and they meet
Yeah, they
there?
did. No, they met
How
they
did they
met
meet?
here. So it's a slightly convoluted story. So it's an Indian story. So
It's
obviously,
a
but
brown podcast.
is it, yeah. So obviously my dad's family had been here by this point for about 8 years, and so they were, established. And my mum's family came over, but even before, actually, before my mum's family came over, so my dad's parents, they used to go back to India during the British winter, just because the British winter at the time was a bit of a shock to them. So they just thought they'd go back.
hmm
It'd be a bit warmer, whatever. They'd be a bit of home. And my granddad used to get the bus into town, and he used to see my mum on the bus.
In
And I think
England, India.
in
Okay.
India, this is. And he had a vague because they're from neighboring villages. My parents, um, their families are anyway. And so he had like a vague community idea of who she was, but he wasn't sure. He did a bit of digging, found out she's basically within the same ballpark of age as my dad. And obviously, at that point, generationally, they're like, okay, maybe he needs to start thinking about getting married and that sort of thing. Um, and so he did some digging and tried to arrange, in the way that they do, arrange a meeting between them. So but obviously it's difficult because my dad was living in England, she was
Yeah.
over in India. But the question came to both of them. Here's a picture of, a guy. Here's a picture of a girl. Do you want to meet? Do you want to? And at the time, my dad
Do you
was,
wanna swipe right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, now it's just swipe right. Back
Yeah.
then
No.
it was like call your uncle, send a telegram to whatever. Um, but at the time they both said no because my mum was studying in
Really?
India. Yeah,
Okay.
my mum was
Ouch.
studying in India and my dad was studying in England, and they were just like, we're not ready. I don't want to like. And then my mum came to England with her family, and my dad remained unmarried. And my granddad was like, "Oh, it's that girl that I tried to, before." And they tried to set them up at a mutual family wedding or something. They tried to get them to meet, and they just didn't meet. I think maybe some of it was willfully ignoring each other. Some of it was my dad just being a bit aloof to the whole thing. Um, and eventually, they just kind of my dad or my mum's dad something. They just invited themselves over and put them both in a room to talk.
Whoa, they forced it. They gave up and they're
Yeah.
like, you know what, just put them in a cage and get this
Just
done.
no, I mean, it was they would always have had a choice, but I think they were just I don't know what it was. I think it was definitely my dad's dad for some reason just had some instinct
And it
about
worked
it.
out. They clicked.
Yeah, I mean, my mum had met other men before that. She'd kind of, they did because they were of a certain age and generationally, that's kind of what started happening. But but thankfully, their families were very easygoing in the sense that there wasn't that if they were allowed to say no if they wanted to say no. My mum
Right.
very much did. She said no to a lot of people. Um,
Did your parents ever tell you why they say ended up saying yes? Did they give
ye-
you any reason?
well, yeah. So I asked them again for my essay for the Good Immigrant. I asked them, and my mum was like, yeah, he made me laugh, and he was just a bit different to the other guys, and we got on, and I thought, yeah. And my dad was like, yeah, she'll do, sort of thing. Even though I know that he feels all sorts of things, but
He's
he
playing
just
hard
kind
to
of said,
get. He's playing the hard to get move.
yeah. So then they were, and then they were both still studying. My mum was still.
What were they studying?
Uh, I know that was it. My mum had studied. She'd done her English. She'd done a degree in English literature over in
Oh,
India.
wow. So you
Yeah,
must have been like given a lot of books to read as a young child.
yeah. I
You've
mean, the
been
tragedy of it for
exposed
me is
to,
that
sorry, go ahead.
to some degree, but the tragedy of it for me was that by the time I came along, my parents were working so hard that that my mum and still, she doesn't really find the time to read herself, and I think there's maybe a sense of regret there for her, but the philosophy remained, and so me and my sister were bookworms as kids, and I wish I was more of a bookworm now. It kind of fell away for me, sadly, but um, my sister remains a bookworm, and you know, my mum had the privilege of education at the time. It was education that her father paid for, and because he had a business, um, and and she was given the freedom as a girl to continue education further, to go to university. Um, and she was just lucky that her dad was someone who allowed that, as it were. Um, and uh, and so she was always aware that education was really important, and I think that's a common theme. I think amongst um, brown communities
Hmm.
is that idea of education being really important. Maybe because we're aware of what a privilege it is to have access to education. I guess when you come to a country like the UK, where education is freely available, um, that you just kind of go, well, yeah, obviously it's got to be so important. So it was always a big one for us.
On the downside is that when, they consider education really important, but at the same time, when it comes to arts and
Mm,
music, that to them isn't really a necessity. It isn't really that important, and at most times it's not really supported because I guess it's a very risky career and you don't really get paid well if you do get
yeah,
paid. How did, your parents, it seems like they're like in this survival mode at that time and they're working really hard. How did they encourage the arts for you as a kid?
yeah. Actually, I was really lucky again that they didn't shut the door on it. They did. They actively encouraged it. They're the ones who sent me to my first drama lessons. Because they saw that I had an energy and I had a um, I suppose what they would have deemed at the time a talent for it, and so they encouraged it. But at the same time, there was a realism to it, and there was a sense of do it, but always have a backup plan.
Hmm.
Um, and you have to in a way complete your education, even though I did everything but university. Um, but then that was because I was lucky. I was already working as an actor, so that's the only reason I didn't go to university. I otherwise would have. Um, and I imagine had I not got that lucky break, it would have been, they
You got
wouldn't.
a lucky break at a very young age.
Very young age, yeah, 16, yeah.
I googled you EastEnders and
Yeah.
you looked very different. You looked.
Yeah,
I was like, wow.
I was 16. Yeah, I did a lot of growing up on that show.
S-
Um,
you grew up in the countryside, and you said that there's not a big South Asian population there, right? Did that not like hinder your confidence growing up, being what you look like in a place that doesn't look like you?
yeah, and I think it's really only in hindsight that I realize why that was in terms of, so much of it was very much about um, my being different in that sense. But because I never, I'm not saying never, I have maybe a handful at most of occasions where I was directly racially abused. Um,
Oh, really?
yeah, no, it was
Like
not
violence,
violently. No, no,
verbally.
but just verbally. That and even that wasn't within my immediate community. It was, at school. Um, that I think I didn't really ever consider that was the point of difference. I just thought that it was just because I was a bit of a nerd and I was socially awkward and not uh, not a jock, in that
Uh,
sense.
okay.
You just kind of go, well, I guess that's who I am, I
But
guess, within this.
I mean, people who feel that they're different or they feel that they're outsiders don't generally try to get the center of attention. And you are, you're going into auditions and doing this stuff.
That's exactly what I was trying to do.
So like,
Yeah.
how's that work? For?
I don't
Like,
know what it was. I guess I just,
you
some
must
people
have
call
like
it.
you must be really confident and or you really believed in yourself in a sense, or you had a very supportive family.
I had a very supportive family, that's for sure. And I don't know. It's just something. It's even now. I will doubt myself about everything I do, but the last thing I doubt myself about is and that's not saying I don't doubt myself about this, but I'll doubt myself about everything else before I doubt my ability to be an actor. Because I don't know, it's just something that I've always enjoyed. I've loved, every time I get to do it, it's something that I adore, and um, it's one of those things, isn't it? It's hard to explain why an artist does what they do. You just kind of have a this thing that has to happen,
Right.
and yeah, it has always been at odds with everything else. I've never been particularly. When I'm still at times very socially awkward and very scared to, if I'm annoyed by something, it'll take me about 5 years to tell that person I was annoyed about what they did, that sort of thing. In this,
That's
yeah,
funny.
yeah.
All right. So you get the role on EastEnders. It's this big.
Mm.
I don't know EastEnders, but I googled it, and it's apparently this like very long running soap opera kind of show that's
Yeah,
popular
it's
in British
been
culture.
35 years it's been going
Wow.
now, yeah.
And you were there for like, I don't know, most of your teenage young adult life, right?
Yeah, all of it, basically 16 on to 25 I was there.
Where you must have been like, whoa, I can't believe this is happening to me.
Yeah, at that age it was like, oh my God, I get to be honest, I was working with actors who I'd admired for years, and on a show that is a British institution, everyone knows it. And almost everyone watches it, even though half the people won't ever tell you they watch it because apparently it's uh, you know TV that you can't admit you watch. I don't know, but you always get this thing where people are like, "Oh, you're on EastEnders? Oh, I don't watch it. I've never seen it." I don't. It's like you definitely have seen it at some point in your life. Like there's no. Anyway, it's very funny, but yeah, it was amazing, and to get to do what I love, learn from some of the best people in the business, and get paid for it. It was incredible. and for it to then just continue for as long as it did. Because again, when you talk about parents who are encouraging but realistic, it was they never. When I got that job, it was like, A, you're not touching any of that money.
Okay.
B, you know, chiefly because they were like, it's precious and you just don't know when the job's going to end.
Right.
They're like, this is amazing. You know, I never felt that they were devaluing my achievement,
Mm-hmm.
but they were being very realistic about the fact that, you know, at the end of the day, it's a business and it's great, but you can't rely on it continuing forever.
They kept you grounded.
Yeah, completely. And my parents run a news agents in this village that we grew up in, and I was still doing the paper round for them until I moved to London at 21. So for 4 or 5 years of being on EastEnders, I was still doing the paper round.
You were still doing the
Um,
paper route
yeah, for my parents. Yeah,
while doing this thing.
yeah. While being on TV.
Wow, you must have really good work ethic.
Well, they do, and and so and they were letting me stay at home rent free to save my money. You know, this money that I was earning. Um, and so, you know, the least I could do in a way was just help them out a bit. Um,
Uh-huh.
and I hated it at the time, obviously,
Yeah. Don't we all?
because all of my friends were off at university and doing all that fun stuff. And I was like, oh, what am I doing? But in hindsight, it was one of the best things to do
Do you,
because it was different. It was a different outlook on things.
do you have that immigrant guilt? You know, the
In
son,
in
the first
Oh,
son
you've got to.
immigrant guilt.
Yeah, of course I do. Yeah, yeah.
Do you think it
I'm
ever
trying.
goes away?
I'm trying to get rid of
How do you get? I don't think you can get rid of it.
it. No, I'm trying to come to understand it um and turn it into something positive, I suppose.
And any
Um,
advice on that? Because I feel it too all the
yeah.
time.
It's hard, isn't it? You just kind of. I think there's a certain amount of credit that one has to give oneself for what you've done. As much as also you stand completely on the shoulders of the sacrifices that were made for you. There's also a certain amount of stuff that has to have come from you yourself, I suppose. And so you can't attribute everything and feel that every failure is something that a failure that kind of echoes down the line, is it's just, there has to be a certain amount of yourself that can be separated from that, from the sacrifices that were made, I think. At the same time, um, not acknowledging those sacrifices. I think it would be very hard for anyone uh, to forget about the sacrifices that have been made for us to exist in this space.
Hmm.
Um, because they're huge. They're really, unless you come from massive privilege, the sacrifices are huge, and I think every day about those I mean, the physical and emotional sacrifices that my parents made and in a way continue to make. It's kind of insurmountable, really.
How do your parents feel now when they watch you, on these talk show and being a guest in these talk shows and doing these
Yeah,
interviews and red carpets and these big budget movies now? That must be like they must send your pictures back home to everybody.
they do. Yeah, they send them to all relatives around the world and and that sort of thing. But they've never been boasty about it.
Hmm.
They remain incredibly humble, almost too humble. Me and my sister are at this thing now where we're trying to get my parents to retire, and we're trying to explain to them like you kind of did it, like you nailed it, like your whole life was about us, and we're great, so you did it, right? But in a way they're too humble, and as I say, the emotional sacrifices have taken the toll. Um, but they've never been boasty about my achievements or my sister, and um, it's it's a testament to them, really. But they're incredibly proud, and they they say it the right amount. They don't say it too much. They don't say it too little. They tell me, and I believe it when they do. It doesn't feel like something they're just saying. Um, and it's exciting, when I get to take them. Well, I did the Graham Norton show here in the UK last year when I was on the Yesterday press tour, and my parents came along, and it was, it's a show they watch every week. They love that show.
And
So
you
it
were
was,
next to Madonna with the eye patch, right?
yeah, yeah. It's those sorts of moments, and them on what was the yellow carpet at the premiere, and um, it's amazing. It's that they when you think about that journey, it's kind of overwhelming, really, to think about from a little village
From
in,
the village in India to all the way to you
yeah,
in, Tenet, and it's yeah, it is. No, you singing songs from the Beatles,
yeah, exactly.
which
That's
is
what
like weird.
this
It's
big premiere in Leicester Square. It's in a way, when you think about the guilt, I guess I try and switch the guilt into pride. Like yeah, I'm proud of myself for, as I say, you have to give yourself some credit for the stuff. I somehow made it through those auditions, and got
yeah.
that role, and all that. That's my work, but I have a real pride in them, in what they have achieved, and and what they've done, and that's in a way where the only way I can deal with that guilt that you talk about is kind of go, I don't need to feel guilty about it. I'm proud of it.
Hmm.
I'm proud of their sacrifices, and what they've done.
I feel a lot of guilt when I spend money on things that are unnecessary.
Yeah.
I don't know
Oh
that I
man.
can never enjoy, a nice car or a fancy restaurant because I know there's a voice, my parents' voice in the back of my head just saying, what are you doing with your life?
Yeah. Yeah.
That I think is going to be there forever.
It's funny with my folks. They've never been I mean, my mum every now and then is just because you know, there is always going to be that worry because they've had to work for every penny they've got.
Exactly.
Like they've never. I tell a story in the essay in The Good Immigrant about whether when they got their shop and they started running the shop together, their first shop. I think it was the first time they made, and obviously back then it was all cash. I think it was the first 100 or the first £1,000 profit they made, and it was there in cash for them to see when they and they'd never seen so much money in their lives, and they were just like, "What do we do with it? Like before we put it in, we'll take it to the bank, but in the meantime, where do we keep it?" So then they just wrapped it in a plastic bag and put it in this drawer underneath the oven, just because
Wow.
it's safe there. And I always think about that story because it's in a way I see that as the beginning of a thing. And that's why, yeah, it's I have to kind of see. I always have to think twice before I buy anything extravagant.
Yeah.
So I have to go. Have I got all my ducks in a row here? Like, is everything else accounted for? Is it sensible to do this? Because
Hmm.
they're also the kind of people who go, if you can do it, enjoy your life. Like, don't hold yourself back from having nice things. But at the same time, it has to be uh, a calculated decision in a sense, because money is here today and gone tomorrow. So
Do you feel the same kind of sense of fear? Because when your parents made that $1,000, £1,000, there's like a sense of fear. Like, what if someone takes us away from us? What do we do? It's like
yeah, yeah,
overwhelming. It's like an overwhelming because now you have to deal, and with you or even me, you have to think about tax, accountants, lawyers.
yeah, yeah,
You got to make sure what you say is appealing, and and even when you're doing an interview, I'm sure you have to kind of like, you probably were, I mean, not you, but in general, people would be worried about how they come off, their persona. Are they, because, the cooler you are, the more interest is on you. All that is very overwhelming, and it freaks me out too. And I don't know, how do you deal with that? Because it's daunting.
Yeah, it is a lot.
I mean, I'm in a micro little scale compared to you, but when I started getting a lot of attention on my Instagram account, and
Yeah.
and I barely talk about myself or I put myself out there, but when I do, it's like, is my voice sounding good? Should I say this? Should I be funny? Should I be bored? Should I be tough? I don't know. But about you, when I look at you and I see you in the audience on TV, I don't know. I'm like, you must be like freaking out or something.
If it's me, yeah. I mean, as I say with the acting, as long as you put the work in, and it's something that I just, you kind of have to get that out of your head before you do it, because otherwise it will fail in a sense if you're up in your own head too much.
Hmm.
But if it's me, so for example, if I'm on the Graham Norton show, as I was, or doing anything else publicity wise, I'm constantly aware of like, don't am I going to say the wrong thing? I do have a tendency to be quite, you know, stayed, I think, in my emotion and in the way that just the way that I am, and and so I'm always a bit like, am I being too boring here? Am I coming across as aloof? Am I like? But at the end of the day, I kind of go, I can't do anything about that. I'm not gonna be anyone else but me. I'm not, you know,
Hmm.
I can't be manufactured in any sense. Like it just, I guess I'm just trying not to be a dick. That's all I can hope for, really. Is like just be don't be. I'm always up for a laugh. I'm not, you know, I'm not up for. You know, I take my job seriously, but I don't want to take myself too seriously in that sense. But, yeah, I think about it. I do think about it, but then I try not to think about it too much. Um, but I'll probably after we've talked here, I'll probably come away going, "Oh, damn, did I say
Same here.
stupid
Same
thing to
here.
say? I
Same
should have."
here.
It
I
is what it is, though,
It
man.
is
I
what it
can't.
is. Yeah. I mean, I can add some background music so it makes it sound cooler, both of us. You know.
Yeah.
So then I think this is where you did EastEnders and somehow
Mm.
you ended up doing a short with Nikesh Shukla, who I had on one of the episodes here, and
Yeah.
I watched his your YouTube short, you guys' YouTube short,
Mm.
Two
Mm.
Dosas, and I thought like this was incredibly amazing and it blew my mind and I loved it and I messaged him and this was the first time I ever DM'd him and I said, "Hey man, I just watched your Two Dosas and this deserves to have its own thing, a TV show or a
Mm.
movie or
Mm.
something. Like why hasn't it, moved forward?" And he just simply replied back, "Because everybody is racist and no one wants to see a brown guy hook up with a white woman." And then that's how we pretty much left it as that. Do you agree with that?
I mean, he can probably speak more to the details of it because he's been on the front line, you know,
Yeah.
since we made that short about 6 years ago now, and he's obviously since then been out there trying to develop it as something more. And that, you know, from the minute we wrapped on it, there was talk of like, well, maybe we'll, and it hasn't. You know, he's had a lot of terrible experiences with work that he's tried to get off the ground, and the answers he gets back. Um, and I've only just started wading into that world really, and really not much at all. But
Do you see
you
it
know,
too? What he sees?
I,
Or
yeah, completely. I mean, I see the proof in the pudding, which is the kind of TV that keeps getting made,
fine.
the kind of
That's a
TV that
given.
doesn't get made, you know. And so, and obviously, I'm at a point where I'm kind of okay. I'm in a position of privilege here. What can I do to make this better? And so part of this year through lockdown and having the time to kind of consider these things, because it's felt a bit like to me, you know, it's been a whirlwind few years, which is amazing, but it's been
Hmm.
nice to have a bit of time to just kind of go, okay, take stock, you know. And one of the things is that, you know, I'm in a position of privilege. I need to do my best to elevate the kind of work that needs to be elevated. He's obviously going to be an important part of that. I think Nikesh is amazing and everything he touches is brilliant. And yeah, he's come up against this thing of we've already got our quota of Asian shows. And
Hmm.
like the argument is it's not an Asian I just happen to be Asian writing this show, but it's not, you don't have to classify it as an Asian show and then make one a year. Like that's what's stopping it from being made. And yeah, as Nikesh says, there's probably some sort of racism going on where people don't want to see certain relationships on screen or whatever. I don't know what that is. It's very, or if they want to see it, it has to be on their own terms rather than from the point of view of, what was special about Two Doses was written by Nikesh, directed by Sam Masood, who's a British Pakistani director. So it was from a completely brown point of view, this thing, I think that's what made it so special, was because it was from the voice of exactly who the main character is, British, South Asian. And there's a truth to that. And I think that's what people loved about it. And it's really upsetting that doesn't get seen more, that isn't valued more, and it's not celebrated. I feel like it's not pushed enough. Sam Masood, who directed Two Doses, he made a great movie a few years later called My Pure Land, which he wrote and directed himself, and he went out to Pakistan with like 3 people and then got a guerrilla crew together out in Pakistan and shot this movie. It's an amazing true story about this girl in a village who protected her home from bandits. And it was, I think it was chosen by the British Film Board, or I don't know who, to be that the British foreign language entrance to the Oscars or whatever. But it didn't get anywhere because it didn't have the distribution push. It didn't have the backing of like, Curzon or whoever the big kind of distributors are here in the UK and internationally. So, and it's on Channel 4's like streaming service here in the UK, which is great. But when it went out on TV, it went out at like 1 a.m. or something like that. It's like, we've got to give these things pride of place. Like, it's really exciting. Steve McQueen's TV series has just started here in the UK, Small Axe, which is like 5 separate movies about Black history in the UK. It's really exciting for me because it's Steve McQueen and a bunch of great actors in it. But that shouldn't be unusual. Like, it shouldn't be unusual to me that they've given a Black TV show pride of place on Sunday night TV. Like, that should be something that is just done because it's good storytelling. And maybe the decision making there is that because it's Steve McQueen, but I wish that more of those kind of stories were given the right elevation that they deserve, because people are out there, they want to tell these stories, and it's a shame to me that doesn't happen more. But I am also questioning my own place in that and what I can do to help. So hopefully I can, in whatever way.
Is there any South Asian movies that like really affected you in your life, or like South Asian British movies or South Asian Hollywood movies?
For me, I mean, I grew up on Bollywood big time, so.
You still watch Bollywood?
I've dropped off the pace with like
Same
films
here.
that are coming out now. But there was, that golden period for me, the golden period of the 90s and the noughties, where there was some amazing movies, and everything that Amar Khan did, like from Lagan onwards, he's always made some really interesting movies. Which I watched Lagan again recently, and it's epic. It's, what was it, like 3.5 hours long? But some of it's like pure Bollywood cheese, and some of it is like really hammering home its point. But that he knows his audience so well. He knows that this is for a mass audience in India, and we need to make it quite clear what our political stance is on things like the caste system, which Lagan touches on. And that was a huge one for me, I think, because it wound up getting nominated for an Oscar.
It did.
It felt like, oh, these two worlds met in the middle.
Yeah.
You're trying to tell, and again, then that was my struggle really as a teenager, was trying to get people to understand that this part of my identity is just as valid. Look, it was nominated for an Oscar, and like when Rang De Basanti came out, and that was a really big movie for me. I loved that movie.
I loved it too.
It got nominated for a BAFTA, and I was like trying to explain to people, it got nominated for a BAFTA. Like, why don't you understand? Why do you not want to watch this movie? but people weren't interested. Well, you know, when I was at school anyway, people weren't particularly interested because it wasn't, I guess, culturally relevant to them, and
And
there
they
is some
didn't
sort
want
of
to
low
read the
level.
subtitles.
Yeah, exactly. It's amazing, isn't it? Like what Bong Joon-ho said when he won the Oscar about, like, you
Yes,
know, if we can get over the, what is it, the 1 inch
the one
obstacle of subtitles or something.
there are so many stories available for you if you just kind of get over that 1 inch of
Yeah,
text at the bottom of
exa
your screen.
exactly. Um, but yeah, it was this. I actually, this sounds like an absolute clanger of a name drop, but when I did Tenet, I was talking to Chris Nolan about my character and stuff before we started shooting, and I said to him, like, it's so exciting that you've got Dimple Kapadia in this movie, like, like it's going to be huge for brown people, you know, because she's such a huge star. And he was saying that, you know, he'd been to India before. He'd been to like a film conference there or something. He spoke, and you know, it was something about IMAX. He was trying to get them to open an IMAX cinema there or something. And um, but he said that he gets recognized and approached the most in India by kids in India who love his work. And he watched some Bollywood movies on the plane over when he went to India that time, and he said he loves the melodrama of it because it's so hard on sleeve about everything, you know. And it's funny when I look back on those movies and when I rewatch them, and you realize how hard on sleeve they are about things. And then I look back on my upbringing and I go, yeah, my mum is a very emotional person, very hard on sleeve. And there's a lot of of that in our culture. A
Hmm.
lot of, you know, importance placed on family and relationships and that sort of thing. And it's really reflected in the art that's created there. It's unapologetic in its sort of proclamations of love, and then, you know, the drama of death and all these things. It's so what we would maybe describe from a Western lens as over the top, but it's no more over the top than the kind of musicals that you see that we have, you know, over here. So it's just strange to me that it's always been seen as a novelty. But
Bollywood movies kind of have this kind of emphasis on love. You know,
yeah,
the one soulmates.
yeah,
You know, and this was in the '90s. It was probably like on steroids. But do you think that affected your relationships? You know, your love life, your relationships, because you grew up watching this kind of insanely emphasized idea of love, and now you're in the real world, and I feel like that affects a lot of people in the community because when they try to find their partner, they have this image of what they're expecting, which is kind of like a Bollywood movies, but what they get is kind of just, you know, reality.
yeah. Reality, which is that person farts sometimes, you know,
Yeah.
like it's yeah. You do that's the danger of it, is that you kind of get sucked into seeing it as reality rather than just a kind of a form of art that kind of elevates certain aspects of life. But I think when something becomes that prevalent within a culture, it does have a power to twist the way people think about how life should go. Um, and I suppose there is a cultural importance placed on things like, you know, weddings and marriage being the end point of everything. The amount of Bollywood movies you watch where the kind of the coda at the end is just them walking around a fire having a Hindu wedding ceremony, you know, it's like as the credits roll. And you look back on it and you go, why is that always the end point? Like, in fact, I can't remember what movie it was now. I asked my parents this recently and they told me, and no, I can't. It was this. Oh, I can't remember what the movie is. Maybe once this goes out, someone will be able to remind us. But it was this movie with Shah Rukh Khan,
Uh huh.
and I just remember, I don't know how old I must have been when I watched this movie, but it stuck out to me because he doesn't get the girl in the end. It like ends with him looking at a silhouette through a window of her and the guy she has ended up with as they, you know, sort of they're about to kiss and then the curtains shut or whatever it was. But then he just kind of mopes down by the waterside, and then it's like a special appearance by Juhi Chawla, and she like shows up, and then they're kind of friends, you know, and they walk off at the end, and it's like, oh, maybe they'll end up together. I can't
Yes,
remember what this movie
I know what
was
you're talking
now.
about, but I can't remember it either.
but it was like it stuck out to me so much. 'Cause I was like, oh wow, so it wasn't really a happy ending, but it sort of was. Like that was so unusual, and so there was this idea that you're kind of left with of, is there a certain way that life is meant to go? Because you're meant to do all this stuff, and then eventually, yeah, you're meant to get married and do all this. Again, thankfully, I think my parents have never been particularly traditional in that sense, so there wasn't much pressure on me personally. But um, it does culturally. There's definitely something that art, that form of art can do when it follows the same tropes for so long.
What about Hollywood movies? Did they have a big influence on you? Any particular movies?
I mean, I've lately been thinking for some reason, and I'll tell you why, because I watched The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary, and and this is not a sort of emotionally important thing at all, but I adored Space Jam. It, and I think it will always remain one of the most important movies I've ever seen. I don't know why. I used to be able to. My sister will attest. I used to be able to quote the entire movie.
Really?
I
You know
watched it
they're,
that many times.
you know they're making a sequel.
Yeah, with
LeBron
LeBron, right?
James, yeah.
I mean, we'll see. But for me, that first one will always have such a. I don't know what it was. It was just so ridiculous. I think that's what it was. Just so free. Like he was like, yeah, there's Michael Jordan, and now he's a baseball player, and then he gets sucked through a golf hole into. Imagine pitching that film. I mean, it's crazy. Yeah, I loved that. I
No,
mean,
there was Who Framed Roger Rabbit like right before that, right? Which did well, I think.
yeah, yeah, that did really well, and you know, I think that's probably fared better critically than Space Jam ever did. But
Yeah.
um, that's one from my childhood that I'm thinking about a lot. And The Lion King and Aladdin were ones that my sister could put in me in front of, and I just shut up. Because I'd just be. Robin Williams as the genie was like such a huge
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
for me. Like again, it's that abandon. There was just an abandon to the performance. It was just like
Can you do that? Can you abandon yourself? Can you get out of your head during when the camera's on? I did improv for like 2 years and
uh,
I just couldn't be free. I just kept thinking what the audience was thinking about me, and then it was just this negative feedback. But do you think you're able to achieve that kind of just like I'm the character now and I can just let go of myself?
I'm hoping that in getting in touch with myself a bit more and with asking those sorts of questions, I suppose is really helpful. Kind of going, how do you actually feel? Being a bit more mindful about how you're feeling in that moment when someone calls action. It's like, are you actually in? How did that? I guess there's always that feeling when someone says cut, or if you're on stage and you come off stage or whatever, you kind of go, okay, let's assess how that actually went. You're kind of tuning into something of kind of going, were you actually just there, or were you thinking about something else the whole time? When I was in Chicago at the beginning of the year. We started shooting this series out in Chicago, and I went to an improv show, and it was incredible. I mean,
Yeah.
just because it was then afterwards that the 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 practitioner who had invented that form of improv was there that day. It happened to be there, and so he did an interview about the form, and it was so detailed. Like the language that they were kind of speaking a language to each other during the improv. I guess what I realized with it is all about the listening, because the thing is they can't ever, this troupe of about 10 actors or whatever, they can't ever not be listening, because they
Hmm.
have to listen out for the word, which means that they then have to do something as a troupe, to twist everything round again and get it. I mean, it's and that sort of thing is so.
It's very
I guess
difficult.
it's difficult, but I suppose it's conducive to better acting. You hear actors say a lot. Acting is reacting, and you have to listen. And I am very guilty of not doing that. Actually, I think sometimes, and um, I think it's something to work on, I suppose.
Yeah. Are you getting a lot of, South Asian roles now? Or Do you think?
Yeah, I mean the more specific offers come through, but
Yeah. So I mean,
it's been nice to do stuff that hasn't been written specifically for that reason.
yeah. Well, all your roles are pretty much. I mean, the ones I've seen in you in movies, they could be written for anybody.
Mm.
I
Yeah,
saw.
it's
I saw
nice.
yesterday. I saw Tenet.
Hmm.
I watched one movie I can't remember where there's a balloon, the
Oh, the aeronauts. Yeah,
the
yeah,
aeronauts. Yeah, I watched that
yeah.
too.
That
That
was
was
really exciting to get to do a period thing.
yeah, that was really cool that you were there with the telescope.
Yeah, and during the 1860s, and I was like, wow, this wouldn't have happened 10 years ago. But then there was a flurry of like brown people in period movies. It was like me and Nat. Dev has just done David Copperfield, which is brilliant,
Yeah, that was insane.
so good. Um, and Riz was in The Sisters Brothers.
Yeah, I watched that too. That which, by the
Yeah,
way, as a Western, which I would never
yeah,
imagine a brown person in any way in that
again,
movie.
yeah.
Yeah,
And it was
and
so good as well. Like it kind of went under the radar that in the film
yeah,
for some
it
reason,
did.
but it was really brilliant.
Crazy cast.
Yeah, really crazy cast. So that I'm glad that we can exist in that space now without anyone having. Well, there obviously will always be people who are like, well, yeah, but it doesn't make sense. Even though your Instagram is proof that it definitely does make sense, but
Does yeah.
I feel like that's a battle that will continue.
You guys should have kind of like a little union together and kind of like have this kind of little
Yeah,
club of like South Asian actors who are just trying to get in, and you guys can like defend each other and kind of like I don't
yeah.
know.
Well, it's
Um,
nice to have. I've met Riz a couple of times, a handful of times over the years, and I finally met Dev just about a year ago, and he was great. And
do you guys like share a connection? Like, hey, we both look the same. How are you? Want to be best
that's
friends?
what I think. That's kind of what it was when we were at the British Independent Film Awards, and I was presenting an award, and he was up for Best Actor for David Copperfield. And then afterwards, we all broke out to the after party, and he came and found me to say hi. Um, and obviously talking about working with Danny. And,
Oh yeah, that's true. You guys have that connection. Slumdog
yeah,
Millionaire yesterday.
yeah, and it was just nice to meet him. Many years of admiring his work, and yeah, Riz, as I said, I've met Riz over the years, and I'm really good friends with Nikesh Patel, and yeah, it's really and Sasha Dewan, who's a great actor. And there's a bunch of us South Asian actors here in London who, we're trying to keep up a community, a sort of a dialogue with each other because we don't want to fall into the thing of scarcity mentality and of kind of going, oh, we can't be friends because we're all going up for the same roles. It's like, well, yeah, we're going up for the same roles, but like we've got to be happy when one of us gets it. Like,
Hmm.
we've got to support each other, and I'm glad that that's kind of happening. It's positive for the future.
Do you have any advice for any, South Asians who want to go into the arts who are kind of trying to do the same journey as you in a world? I guess any South Asian that's trying to, or any person of color trying to succeed in an industry that's dominated by white men,
Mm,
which is almost everyone, I guess.
yeah. Um, just keep keep fighting, I think is the thing, and don't let anyone tell you that it can't be done because it just takes some people proving that it can be done for it to then suddenly become every, and everyone probably act like, oh yeah, we were doing this whole time. you know, I look at a show like Atlanta, which I think is one of the best things ever made, and
Yes, amazing show.
there's no way that they would have got that made if they'd been completely honest about what they were going to do. You watch the first episode and it's like pretty tightly plotted and it's all there, and then the next episode doesn't go where you think it's going to go, and then it just continues in that way. And I mean, it's one of the greatest things ever, and it's clearly, but people kind of going, we don't really care. We're just going to make this thing the way we want to make it, and it's really inspiring,
It is, yeah.
to
There's also Rami, which is a great show too.
Yes, I need to check that out. I've not watched it
Yeah.
yet.
There's
Um,
Rami. There's a lot of people of color kind of rising up now. Like the shows are kind of kicking in, which is good to
yeah,
see.
um, it is good to see, and it's when they're of that high quality, and I think it's when they become kind of unignorable
Yeah.
that
Be
that
so
that
good. I think it was Steve Martin that said, "Be so good that they can't ignore you."
yeah, and it's that thing, and you have to. But when you look at something like Atlanta, they didn't just come out of nowhere. Obviously Donald Glover has been an artist for years in so many different guises, and it takes a lot of hard work. And I was lucky enough to work with Hero, the director, on Station 11 earlier this year, and he's been working for years through music videos and everything, um, and all the actors on that show, and they've been plugging away for years, just slogging it out, and then they finally got to be part of this thing, and it is what it is. And I feel like Donald Glover tweeted he never tweets, and he tweeted the other day, like, by the way, while we're all here, it's going to be the season 3 and 4 are going to be the best thing you've ever seen.
Yeah, he said something like, "You think I was hot in 2018? Wait till you see what I'm about to do," and which I'm excited for.
So
God,
exciting, so exciting.
I would watch his music video, "This Is America," and just if I need an motivation boost or like inspiration, to just go
Oh
back to
man,
that
every
video.
time. I took everything in my strength to not grill Hero about it when we were working together, because you don't want to be that guy.
No, I want to dye my
But
hair, my beard blonde like he did. But like
yeah,
I can't pull that off.
I think you could.
No, man, not there yet. Not you could pull
Well,
it off. You could pull it off. You just came out of Tenet. You just saved the world. You can kill it now, and you sing. I'm waiting for your debut album. Which crazy, by the way. If you go on Spotify and you Google, you put your name up there. You're singing the cover of Yesterday.
yeah, the record comes up.
Oh, you actually do have
It's
a
pretty.
debut album coming out?
No, no, no.
No.
When you type in Spotify, I was just agreeing with you that the record. I don't have a
Like, you-
on the record. I do not have a debut album coming out.
Okay, okay. Not yet, not
before
yet.
before that gets there. Yeah.
But like, I
Um,
mean, you can sing. You should, get on that.
I mean, it's funny because I've got lots of friends who are great musicians, and I kind of just feel like I feel like a slight imposter if I say that ever. But then I don't know, it does interest me. I've just with a million other things going on. You kind of like, okay, well, where do I focus my energy right now? But music has always been important to me, and it was really nice to go on that journey and kind of find my voice a bit and enjoy that. So yeah.
Um, do you want to add anything before we go? You want to, you
No,
want to
man.
talk about something? You want to ask any questions? You want to plug something in? I don't know. The pen is yours. The stage is yours.
The stage. I mean, hey, I've always been intrigued by where your journey began with brand history because it's just
Uh,
such a
just-
great.
I don't know.
It's
It's
so
not.
inspiring, honestly. Like every time I see something, I go, well, "How is that not a movie yet? Is that a movie yet? We need to make a movie of that." Every time I see something else new. So.
You can thank me in the Academy Awards if you make a movie. Thank you, Brown History.
Yeah.
I don't know. One day I just wanted to learn more about my roots,
Mm,
and I wanted to kind of show something for it. It's honestly, I just Forrest Gumped the whole thing. I just,
perfect.
I just did it and it just went on, and that's
Yeah, I
it.
feel like I'm doing that with my career as well. That's my advice. Just Forrest Gump the whole thing.
Just Forrest Gump. Just keep walking forward. Just follow your
Just
feet.
yeah, and don't let anyone stop you. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it. And then my intentions are I just hopefully I can give back and just.
It's great, man. Well, thank you for all that work. It's
And
great.
thank you for doing this. This is really cool.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Thank
Speak to you
you.
soon.
Take care.
Bye, bye.
Bye bye.